I'm Kristen Mosier, and my husband is a 100% disabled veteran, so it's in the family. Um, Please don't get arrested if you can help it. Let me just say that from the get-go. If you have a situation where there's something that's a ordinance or a law or something that seems to be not in accord, call us first. And go out there, let them threaten you with arrest, and walk away, please. If you can help it, do not get arrested. Anyway, as I said, I'm Kristen Mosier. I'm a self-employed attorney now in Nashville, Tennessee. But my road to becoming an attorney is kind of an interesting one. I grew up with a picket sign in my hand. My parents have been fighting abortion since 1973.
Praise God.
Yep. They are 79 and 81 years old, and they still protest and pray outside of abortion clinics in Huntsville, Alabama. It's a very lonely place for them, and they've now had to hire an off-duty police officer to protect them because people will try to drive up on the curb and do all kinds of things to try to kill these elderly people.
Wow.
So, but back in the 80s, I would picket and protest and pray outside of abortion clinics with my parents. My dad ended up getting arrested 12 times with Operation Rescue.
Amen.
Yes, he's a very brave man. He worked for the Army Missile Command and lost his security clearance as a result of getting arrested so many times, as if a man defending little babies was a threat to our country's security. So I decided somebody in the family better become a lawyer. That's right. I also got arrested twice with Operation Rescue, sitting and blocking clinic doors. I know for sure one day that we did it in Mississippi that 5 women decided to change their minds and not get an abortion that day. So I know that my arrest that day, there are 5 people on this earth. I hope I get to meet them in heaven.
Amen.
So when I decided to go to law school, there was only one law school I wanted to go to. That was Regent University, which is Pat Robertson's university. I had to go through an interview process with a professor at Regent to make sure that I was of good character and could be accepted into this law school despite having the scores on the test and the grades. As it turns out, the professor I was assigned to interview with was Professor James Duane, who was the chief counsel on an anti-abortion case pending before the Supreme Court. So God had his hand on that, and I was accepted into Regent University. And it was a great place to learn the law as it is given from the lawgiver, and not a bunch of liberal, progressive garbage. So I interned with the American Center for Law and Justice, which is Jay Sekulo's law firm, while I was there. Since then, I have been in private practice, but I have stayed working with religious liberties law firms. I've worked with the Alliance Defending Freedom, and that was my first encounter with a street preacher, a brave man here today, John McGlone. He and Kerrigan Skelly. Back in 2010, we had a case where they were outside of Austin Peay University, and they had all kinds of onerous requirements for the preachers. There was a 90-minute limit, and they could only preach once per semester. Correct me if I get my facts wrong, John. There was a designated plaza, despite the fact that Austin Peay is kind of in the middle of Clarksville, and the sidewalks are kind of part of the city and not really distinguishable from the rest of the campus. But anyway, you couldn't really distinguish the space. So the law was challenged from Austin Peay that it was a prior restraint on free speech.
Thank you.
If there's a prior restraint like that, it has to be what's called strict scrutiny under the law. If you have a time and a place, a permit required, or some kind of disclosure provisions. I think you had to put a bunch of crazy personal information on the application to preach. Anyway, we ended up winning that case. I think we had to take it up on appeal, and we won on appeal on that case. And then the next case also was John McGlone again versus Tennessee Tech University here in Cookeville, wasn't it? In Cookeville, yeah. So you had to put an application 14 days in advance and a bunch of other requirements. And he's like, look, I'm from out of town. I don't know where I'm going to be 14 days in advance. All these requirements. Anyway, we ended up winning that case as well. So we did challenge those laws successfully. Mr. McGlone did not have to get arrested. Well, then some years passed, and I was contacted by Rick Nelson with the American Liberties Institute. Lo and behold, troublemaker John McGlone again. He and Jeremy Peters, who I don't think is here today, also an amazing, amazing man who should have been dead many times over. Just has an absolutely miraculous story. But anyway, they were preaching outside the Pride, if we can use that word, that's their word, the Pride Festival in downtown Nashville. And he had problems being excluded from the festival, being driven outside the borders, being too far away where you really couldn't hear him. Tried to resolve it, sent letters, contacted the police in advance, everything. Well, eventually in 2017, I believe it was, the preachers arrived. It was Mr. McGlone and Peters. There were some others too with him, but those were our two plaintiffs in that case. Moved him across the street from the festival. The festival was on the square in front of the courthouse, the big green, and they had a permit for their festival, but it went outside even the green on. They had like a fence type situation where it even went on to the sidewalk, the public sidewalk. Well, our preachers were told, you can't be over there. They've got this rented out. You don't have a ticket. You can just go across the street with your megaphone. That's good enough. They can hear you over there. Well, if you've ever been in downtown Nashville, it is loud as heck. You're too far away. You can't really one-on-one with people. It really wasn't a good solution. So we ended up losing that case in the district court. We had to take it up on appeal. There's another lawyer that works with Rick Nelson. His name is David Marchese. He's an absolutely brilliant brief writer. Well, he wrote the brief and argued the case, and I went with him to Cincinnati. We argued it on appeal. Metro basically blew it on appeal. Their lawyers got up in front of that court and said, well, we were trying to make a safe space for these Pride Festival goers. And one of the judges said, well, you know, if a minister was out there offering to do gay marriages and they stood on the sidewalk, would they be allowed to be there? Oh, yes. Well, just like that, we knew we had them because we knew our preachers had been censored based on the content of their speech. Can't do that.
That's right.
So we won that case on appeal. It was sent back down to Metro. And so we had to work out the injunction that was supposed to go down. And we went back and forth for months on that. Went to a mediation over it. Long story short, we got an injunction where every single police officer in Metro had to go through training. There had to be company-wide training and no restraint on preaching in open spaces in downtown Nashville. Thank you, John, for your bravery. So the best part for the lawyers was we got all our attorney fees, and Metro had to pay over $300,000 in damages.
Amen.
So, the next case was Tim Brown. Some of you may know him. He's from Cookeville here. I don't think he's here today. In June 2017, he was exercising his constitutional rights to free speech in a public park. Was it the Pride Festival? It was. Okay. So, an officer comes up to him and says, this is a public park, and these Pride people have rented this park. And yeah, these people don't want you here, and they have the right to kick you out of the park. They were saying you're approaching people with your propaganda and everything. I've got the words here. Everything you're talking to them about it, they don't want you here. When you're approaching them with pamphlets and asking them to take pamphlets, now you're crossing the line. You're approaching someone that does not want you here. If y'all start calling these people stupid and start making comments, then I've got issues with it. You can't be degrading them and calling them names. Well, I guess calling out sin is calling names. That's the city rules. We've checked on them, and that's the city ordinance rules. You can't say offensive things. We've checked with the permit lady. She also said if you continue disrupting and you cause problems by calling them names and stuff like that, you will be cited with disorderly conduct. So, Mr. Brown and his fellow preachers moved. They moved under threat of arrest because we've told them, please don't get arrested. We'll work out the problem with the ordinances. Just don't get arrested. So he moved, and they told him to move again and said, you're allowed to be here, but you have to be 50 feet from the area they rented. So Mr. Brown moved again, but obviously he was so far away at that point, it really was kind of pointless. Until we brought a lawsuit. Then it had a point. So anyway, they struck down their ordinance, and he even got an apology letter. And I want to read you the apology. Dear Mr. Brown, the City of Cookeville regrets that you were required to move 50 feet from your intended speaking location in Dogwood Park. The city recognizes the rights of people to peaceably speak. In order to resolve our dispute, the city has repealed the offending code provisions and has communicated with senior law enforcement personnel the rights and duties under the new code provisions to ensure your constitutional rights will be respected. Sincerely, Mike Davidson, City Manager.
What's the legal side?
Thanks for that question. That's a great question. It really just complicates things from the civil side because then first of all, you're going to need two lawyers.
Could you just speak briefly to the difference between the criminal side and the civil side? What's the difference?
So in the criminal side, you're getting prosecuted by the state, and you're going to have to fight imprisonment or fines. Most civil attorneys like me and Rick Nelson and the others, we're not criminal attorneys. We don't deal on that side. So you'll need two attorneys usually. The civil side is a redress for civil wrongs that have occurred. Some kind of violation of a constitutional right, a God-given constitutional right. And so you seek to strike down unlawful laws and ordinances and rules. We seek training. We seek clarification of laws that are on the books. And you can get monetary damages. None of that occurs in a criminal side. It really complicates things for the civil side if there's a criminal case pending. They'll try to make you plea or do something like that. It makes things much, much more complicated if they're like, well, he's been arrested, he's guilty. So it works out better for us if we challenge the ordinance without having to worry about our client facing criminal charges.
So just to clarify again, the criminal charges would result according to whatever ordinance that they're trying to apply. And if they cite you, arrest you, that's a criminal matter based on that thing.
Right.
So,
JR, you'll have to stand in line, brother. These people are already kind of...
I was trying to clarify for the different people.
Okay, no problem.
I wanted to clarify between civil and criminal. Why it's a...
Where's our war cry? We don't even know that we're at war. We don't understand that we're in hostile territory. This isn't a time of peace. Rock, Fasak.